Today is my absolute pleasure to welcome the editor-in-chief of IO9 and the award-winning writer, Charlie Jane Anders, for All the Birds in the Sky.
Thanks so much for coming out. Laurence first met his girlfriend, Serafina, at a robot fashion show, with robots modeling human clothing and humans modeling robot fashions, like mechanical lingerie. The event happened at a garagey art space somewhere south of Market, with a gunmetal trough full of artisanal vodka. Laurence had come this close to mistaking Serafina for one of the models. Her cheekbones and oval face, her lustrous skin and shiny red/black hair were that amazing. But he realized just in time that she was one of the robot makers instead. Serafina's model was a steel sylph with ball and socket joints that let it strike a pose, pivot, talk with its delicate hands. Laurence had helped to build BattleBots in college, but never artificial supermodels, and he had managed to say something witty enough about the difference between the two that Serafina had friended him on MeU. They met for coffee a few days after that, and the coffee date morphed into a dinner date, and the third time they hung out, it was tacitly a sleepover. Serafina had a toothbrush and condoms in a pouch of her vinyl shoulder bag, which was Tweaky from Buck Rogers. Pro tip: do not think of beady 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 while you're having sex for the first time with the most beautiful woman alive, or you will have some explaining to do, even if your motion, rocking the bed frame, does have a sort of beady 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 rhythm to it. After that, they hung out every other day, held hands in the streets, skipped through traffic, whispered in each other's ears in public, clung together skin to skin in every moment in private, and swapped gene prints, traded odd little gifts, and wondered how soon was too soon to say, "I love you." Laurence had soon found out that letting people know that he was part of the 10% project was a super fast ticket to getting laid. Laurence was finally a rock star, about time, really, and yet there was still no way that he was in Serafina's league. She was perfect. He was damaged goods. He never forgot this disparity for a second. About a month after they started dating, Serafina took Laurence into her sanctum. She had to sign him in, and he had to surrender his ID to the man at the desk, who printed a badge with Laurence's fresh photo on it. She led him down an elevator, along a sloping hallway, through two keypad-secured doors and on into the lab. Inside, eyes watched Laurence from every wall and flat surface. 4 of them belonged to bearded humans who said, "Yo," and then looked down at their workstations, but the rest all belonged to robots in various states of assembly. Serafina barely introduced Laurence to the 2 humans, but took her time showing him the robots, who were animatronic cartoon characters or animals or a few mannequin heads. "This is Frank. He laughs a lot. Watch out for Barbara. She flirts, but she's got a mean streak." The robots all seemed to like Laurence, especially Donald the cactus. By now, Laurence and Serafina had been dating for 5 months. And lately, every time Serafina looked at her phone while they were hanging out, or stared into space, or bit her thick lower lip in the middle of a conversation, Laurence braced himself. This was it. She was going to dump him. Then the moment would pass. Laurence was sure that she was just waiting for the right moment or the ideal pretext. Every time he woke up next to her, he wondered if this was the last time her breath would warm the back of his neck and her breasts would graze either side of his spine. He was not going to lose her. He had aced bigger challenges than this. He was going to think of something, take extreme measures, even deploy the nuclear option early if he had to. He was going to find a way to hold on to this amazing girl. Serafina was late for dinner because her emotional robots had been having a nervous breakdown. All of them. It took me the whole day to figure out what was bothering them. They just kept wigging out and giving us all the hairy eyeball. We looked at everything that had changed in the lab, trying to eliminate any possible variable. Like, was the music different? Did we update their code recently? Laurence didn't rush her. Problem solving and troubleshooting were a source of pleasure for both of them, and narrating the process was the next best thing to doing it. The same neural pathways lit up when you talked your way through the maze as when you actually solved it for the first time, except this time you were bathed in the glow of already having unraveled the thing. And yet, Laurence was still uncomfortable. For one thing, because Serafina was late, They were stuck sitting at one of the sidewalk tables at the fancy pizza place with nothing but a tiny heat lamp and 3 meatballs to insulate them from the fog until the pizza arrived. For another, he was trying to be a good listener because of his ongoing not getting dumped project, and active listening was hard work. We finally figured out the one thing that had changed, Serafina said. She wore a camisole, but she'd put her bulky jacket back on when they were seated outdoors. The heat lamp made her skin look bronze. Matt just got a caddy, and he brought it into the office. As soon as we took the caddy out of Wi-Fi range, the robots calmed down. Somewhat. And before you ask, the caddy did not have any weird apps installed on it. It was fresh from the store. Wi-Fi range. So they were getting something from the caddy on their wireless network that upset them. Laurence pulled out his own caddy and glanced over it as if he would suddenly spot some brand new feature. It still looked like a big guitar pick with a curved base covered with aluminum. The caddy was scanning for open networks, the same as always, but it wouldn't link up with other machines on the same network without being instructed to do so, unless... Here's what I don't get, Laurence said, bisecting the 3rd meatball so Serafina could have half. The meatball was their only protection against the cold, the last of their dwindling supplies until the pizza arrived. So, your emotional robots, they don't have emotions in the way that humans do, right? No offense. Laurence was on thin ice here, and not only the edge, but the dead middle of a lake, 100 fragile paces in any direction. The robots simulate emotional responses to some situations, and then they try to pick up on what the people around them are feeling, right? You make it sound like we're designing 3-dimensional game avatars. Serafina didn't quite push her chair back, but she did seem a little further away. I'm aware it's a lot more involved than that, Laurence said, both because of the uncanny valley and because the physical world is a lot more complicated. But the real point is, how do you know your emotions are spontaneous and genuine and not just a pre-programmed set of responses? I don't. I wonder about that all the time. Laurence was conscious that it was probably a bad idea to confess to your girlfriend that you often wondered if your feelings were just an involuntary response. I just wonder, assuming that they have a particular feeling, a reason for feeling a particular way, and they don't just wake up on the wrong side of the bed, the caddy had to be doing something that resembled an aggressive act as defined in their response matrices, right? Yeah, Serafina said. They reacted as if they were being threatened. The pizza came at last, just when Laurence needed something to distract Serafina from what a mansplaining dick he was being, in spite of all his resolutions. There has to be some other explanation, Laurence said. You're talking about a caddy. It's not a black box. People have jailbroken and... Sorry, I just lost my stopwatch. Okay. People have jailbroken and wiped them. They've installed Linux on them, and they've also ported the Caddy OS over to cheap imitation tablets from Liberia. This is the most hacked device in history. If there was something weird about it, we'd know by now. Hey, said Serafina, chewing pizza. Occam's razor is not just an optional weapon in Street Warrior 5. I already told you, we eliminated all other possibilities. The harder Laurence tried not to screw up, the worse he screwed up. He was not going to get dumped. That was not a possible outcome. So I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. There's more about the caddy, this miraculous device. So Patricia, who's the other main character in the book, is a witch, and she's been going through a crisis, and we pick up there. Patricia was fixing Reginald's sink, which had one of those glitchy new valves that were supposed to shut off the water after a couple of minutes. And she found herself talking about her latest breakup and, her fear that she was just always going to be alone. I just never have time for anybody, she said. I just keep isolating myself. I'm just basically doomed to wind up alone forever, right? Patricia expected Reginald to offer some bromides about how she just needed to be herself. But instead he said, "Get a caddy." What? She nearly bonked her head on the sink. Get a caddy. It will change your life. I am not kidding at all. You become totally connected to all the people in your life, not like regular social networking either. It's uncanny. You will just run into people you know, in person, when you most need to see them. I could barely afford one on my fixed income, but it turned out to be the best investment I ever made. I always thought caddies were just for mission hipsters, Patricia said. Anyway, it sounds creepy. Seriously, no. It's not creepy, and it's so easy to use. It doesn't spy on you or tell you to stalk your friends. I never felt like it was invading my privacy. It just makes serendipity happen more often. It's unobtrusive, and it doesn't give you a bunch of alerts, but you'll always know what's the one party that you shouldn't miss. I was feeling isolated, even with your much appreciated visits, and then I got this caddy, and I feel as though I'm back in my own life again. In spite of Reginald's insistence that the caddy was not at all creepy, his hard sell in itself was kind of creepy. He sounded like someone who had just joined a cult. Patricia vowed that she would never, ever buy a caddy. Ever. Ever. 2 days later, Patricia was in the caddy store, near Union Square. It was narrow, with curving walls that drew you towards the counter at the back, like a stream curving around some rocks. The walls seemed to glow. Patricia picked up a caddy from the display on one wall, and the screen flared to life. There was a swirl of colors, and then it resolved into a wheel shape. The wheels had swirls coming out of its center, sort of like a Taoist symbol, and each of them got bigger when she touched it. They included things like communication, orientation, self-expression, and introspection. She paid for the caddy with her ATM card and felt like a total wanker. Next, she was just going to go get some giant square dark glasses and a medallion that changed color depending on how recently she had gotten laid. God. Still, it was a fun toy. And at this point, she would try anything to make herself feel less claustrophobic and isolated and self-absorbed, although there was something perverse about buying a device that offered a huge introspection wedge in the hopes that it would make her more social. That night, Patricia sat in bed and played with her new caddy. It was not that different from the standard tablet, except for the guitar pick shape and the way that it insisted on asking you demented questions to customize your experience, like, would you rather lose your sense of smell or taste? When was the last time you were glad you stayed up late? There was a checkbox to disable the questions, but everybody said they made it work 1,000,000 times better, and they tapered off after about a day. And sure enough, after a few days, the caddy was steering her towards, oh so gently, towards happy accidents and little discoveries. There was that little egg-themed restaurant in Hayes Valley where everybody sat in egg chairs and ate egg dishes, from Scotch eggs to Chinese-style egg tarts, and drank cocktails with egg yolks in them. The whole place was an allergy waiting to happen, but it was also warm and cozy, and there was a faint smell of butter and sugar in the air, making her feel like she was in her grandma's kitchen and 5 years old. The caddy helped Patricia figure out which bus to take to avoid being late for work, and when one of her Mary Janes broke a strap, the caddy steered her to this hole-in-the-wall place that fixed it on the spot. Within a few days, Patricia had a low-level awareness of what a dozen or so people in her life were up to at any given moment, without feeling overwhelmed. She managed to grab lunch with her friend Taylor and make time for an ice cream conference with her roommates, Dee Dee and Rashaline. Then, something weird happened. Right around the time that Patricia had gotten used to the caddy and started thinking of it as an extension of her personality rather than just an appliance, after about 5 days, in other words, she started running into Laurence. A lot. At lunch, at dinner, at tea, on the bus, in the park. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal because San Francisco was a tiny town, but after a couple of days, it felt weird. She would see Laurence, say hi, mumble a few awkward words, and then bail. And then the process would repeat a couple hours later. She would think that he was stalking her, except that she was the least stalkable person on the planet. The third day, she tried shaking up her routine, going for vegan soul food in the outer sunset, and somehow Laurence was there too, going to some kind of Musée Mécanique revival. Hey again, he said. He started to say something else, and then felt better, seemed to think better of it. She was already saying hey and turning back to talk to Taylor. On her break at work, she picked up her caddy and scrawled, "What's the deal with Laurence?" with her finger. The caddy responded by telling her some facts about Laurence, including some physics prize that he'd won at MIT. She couldn't help feeling like the caddy understood the question perfectly and was just playing dumb. She decided to leave her caddy at home, and for a whole day, her life was boring again, just missing the bus and not connecting with her friends and not having time to grab dinner in the middle of doing errands. The rain started just as she was heading home for the night, and she had forgotten her umbrella, and there was no place to buy one. And of course, she had to run 10 blocks to catch the bus, which left just as she got there. She waited another half an hour under a disintegrating canopy for the next bus, and when she staggered on board, drenched as a sponge, the only empty seat, was next to Laurence. I'm going to stop there. Thanks. Yeah.
So I think it's hilarious that I would love for all of our UX designers to read about caddies. And I'm sure they would all love to make one magically work as well as it does in the universe you've created. So thanks so much for joining us today. I think the first question is, what inspired you to write the book?
It started out as just sort of like thinking about putting these two genres together, fantasy and science fiction, in kind of one bundle. And then, when I started to really think about it, I started to think of it more as the story of these two people, the mad scientist and the witch, and less like just, kind of a genre story. I got more excited about their different worldviews and their different kind of feelings about magic and science and, nature and technology.
What were sort of some of the challenges of weaving together a universe that combines those without flaw?
I mean, basically, the main thing was there was a million challenges, but in terms of bringing together the science fiction thing and the fantasy thing of these two characters, the world building was a challenge. Like making the fantasy world feel grounded and real and like something that could actually coexist with, a realistic quote unquote world of machines and computers and stuff. It meant that I couldn't really go kind of crazy, like full on Harry Potter, or kind of just like have like magical shit exploding all over the place. It had to kind of be a little bit more, a little bit more grounded, I guess, and like something that actually you could believe was in our world and that was all around us without, people noticing. And then, with the science stuff, again, I couldn't go too broad with like the kind of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius side of it or whatever, because, I wanted it to contrast with the magic as much as possible. So the more kind of it felt like, they're working for startups, they go to MIT, they have a loft in Soma or whatever, that kind of stuff. The more it felt like real life geeks, the more I kind of believed in it, and the more it kind of was a good counterpoint to the magic stuff, which was more of a made-up world.
Speaking of real-life geeks, since we're at Google,
yeah.
What sort of research did you do in terms of, I assume there's probably more research to be done in terms of the scientific side of the book than the magical side of the book, but that might just be my bias.
The magic side, I just had to do a lot of thinking, and I'd read a lot of fantasy, and I had to just kind of make sure that I had something that actually had internal logic and wasn't kind of derivative of other stuff I'd read. With the science stuff, I talked to a jillion science people about like the physics in the book, and actually there was somebody who was I think she's a postdoc now. She was working at Microsoft for a while. She was getting her PhD in computer science. She's done a lot of stuff on AI, and she spent hours going through like the AI stuff in the book, and like kind of part of what the book, like as you can see from the stuff about the caddy, there's kind of a theme of AI emerging from our personal technology and our gadgets and the things that we interface with every day and that we kind of depend on to enable our lives now. And that's not something, obviously, that I came up with. That's been in a million other things. And the movie Her came out while I was writing this book, and I was like, damn, because I felt like Her kind of beat me to the punch a little bit on some of that stuff. But there's been a million other things. Like, that's almost a cliche at this point. But I really wanted something that was like a realistic, like, AI in a consumer gadget, kind of.
It's something that we at Google and other companies are trying to work on, like Google Now, and it's trying to make your life easier and sort of. So if you had to pick, if you could only live in one world, a world with magic or a world as a super scientist, which would you pick?
I guess if I could be like one of the witches in Patricia's world, that would be pretty awesome because they can do some pretty amazing stuff. But there's a huge cost to it, so I don't know. It's tough. I think the magic world.
So the book is set in San Francisco, which is where we're near. And it was great for me because I'm from the Bay Area and reading, San Francisco could be fiction if you haven't been here. So what are some of what did you weave in terms of having to weave a pretty much like made up place into a made up place?
I mean, a lot of the stuff in San Francisco is the real San Francisco, like the part I just read there at Pizzeria Delfina, and later in that section they go to the Latin American Club in Humphrey Slocum. It's like there's like real places. I think the Egg restaurant in Hayes Valley doesn't actually exist. There's a couple of places that are a little bit like that in Hayes Valley. There's like that bookstore bar place that kind of has a little bit of an egg thing going on, but I guess it's not really the same. But then I just tried to kind of like, there are things like where the magicians live, like there's this used bookstore that one of them lives in, which is right in the middle of the Mission, and I just kind of drew on some real places and kind of changed it around a little bit. So, I mean, there was so much other made-up stuff in the book that was kind of just completely out of left field that as much as possible I wanted the setting to be just 100% grounded. And there was a little bit of like, because that stuff all takes place 10 years from now, and it was like, do I really think, Pizzeria Delfina will be here in 10 years? Do I think, Humphrey Slocum? I don't know. I hope so.
Gotta get the breakfast cereal. Did you always know you wanted to set in San Francisco, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, the first like third of the book isn't set in San Francisco, and then I was just like, I think I decided to set the grown-up parts in San Francisco out of total like sheer laziness, because I was just like, I didn't want to have to deal with like trying to, if I set it in some other city, there'd be a lot more research and making sure that things actually felt, even like New York or Boston, where I've spent a lot of time, it's just not quite as like automatic.
One thing you did that I thought is really interesting is that you've actually shared parts of the book that didn't make it into the book online. Yeah. I'm actually kind of curious as to the motivation behind this. Is it just sort of like DVD extras, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of DVD extras. I have a Tumblr, allthebirdsinthesky.tumblr.com, where I've been just posting deleted scenes from the book, and it's mostly just because there's so much of it. There's like, the book was like a billion pages longer, and there was a lot of stuff that I really liked that I had to cut just for length, and some of it adds kind of to your appreciation, or hopefully your understanding or whatever, of some of the supporting characters and some of the other stuff that's going on. And I don't know, I think it's fun to see that stuff, and it's probably going to never be used anywhere else, so might as well post it, and hopefully people like it and it doesn't just give a weird impression of what the book is like, since it's all the stuff that actually wasn't in the book. I don't know.
No, it's cool. It's just one of those things where I was like, well, you could have written an entire other book based on, like the additional materials. Yeah. I'm wondering, as someone, you obviously, when you're working for IO9, you consume and analyze a lot of science fiction and fantasy and media, and did you ever find yourself going, like, oh, I'm going to hold back because I know this person did this, or was it sort of encouraging to be like, well, I know this person did this well, so I'm going to do it better? Yeah,
I mean, I'm definitely like super hyper aware of like what's been done. I mean, not all the time. I'm sure there's like things that I'm not aware of because I can't know every single thing, but I kind of know the things that people are, that people have been excited about. And that's kind of weird, like being that hyper aware, but I feel like that's all of us. Like we all kind of are hyper aware at this point. Like, I was in a writing group years and years and years ago, and someone wrote a short story or a novel where there was an AI named Michael, or named Mike or whatever, and everybody was like, oh my God, how can you do that? What are you doing? Like, because that's the name of the AI in The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein, and it was like, why would you name your AI Mike? Is this some kind of weird shout out, or are you just like, I don't know. Anyway, so things like that, like you can never entirely avoid stuff like that unless you just have like encyclopedic knowledge of the genre, which I definitely do not have. So, that's another reason why you have to show it to people, and also just trust that your editor at some point will ping you if you've made a mistake like that. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, the more time goes on, the more stuff there is, and the more you're likely to be ripping someone off without realizing it.
Paying him a compliment. Invitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
It's an homage. Yeah, exactly.
So who are some of your inspirations?
I mean, for this book in particular, like the number one inspiration that I always talk about is Doris Lessing, because she's an incredible writer who did this kind of weird blend of science fiction and realism in a lot of her books, especially this 5-book series, the Martha Quest series, which I encourage everybody to read because it's amazing. It starts out super, like, very tightly autobiographical about, you know, a young woman growing up in Africa and getting involved in Marxist politics in the 50s. And then, you know, she wrote it over a period of like 20 years, and by the end, there's like nuclear war and mutants and psychic powers, and just like it gets way more, it just more and more out there as it goes along. But it feels kind of seamless. It just kind of like, it feels like, oh, okay, you know, the world wasn't kind of more normal and now it's not, kind of.
So the first half of the book takes place in their sort of children and young adults, and were there any books that sort of shaped you as a young adult that into the writer you are today?
I mean, I read a ton of Judy Blume and, like, you know, Beverly Cleary when I was a kid. I love them. I love the Chronicles of Prydain. I don't know if that's YA or middle grade, but I love those a lot. And anything by Daniel Pinkwater. Daniel Pinkwater is like the greatest. Yeah.
All right. Do you have like a favorite hero or heroine in literature?
Oh, man. There's so many. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I love Katniss Everdeen, actually. I think she's a great hero. I think she's actually like a really like terrific character who, you know, there's just so much going on with her.
And then if you were hosting a dinner party and you could invite 3 authors, dead or alive, who would you?
God, I mean, definitely Vonnegut for sure. Vonnegut and Lessing actually would be pretty hilarious to see those two together. I don't know. And then I don't know who the third would be. Maybe Michael Chabon. I don't know. That'd be kind of fun. I don't know.
He's a nice guy.
Yeah. One living author at least.
Yeah. Is there something that you wish you could tell yourself when you set out to write this book that you know now that it's done and published? If you do time travel, that's part of the...
Yeah, I don't know. Just it would have been nice to know that it wasn't just going to be a total flaming disaster. I mean, at least not a total flaming disaster. I don't know. Like for at least a few years, I was pretty convinced that it was just going to be a trash fire forever. But I don't know. I mean, the main thing that was the mistake I made was trying to go too broad and over the top with the humor at first. And there was a slow process of kind of peeling back the humor until I got to something that was a little bit more personal and you know, kind of had more space for the characters and their emotions. So that was something that, you know, could have saved a lot of time if I hadn't gone that way. But I think it was probably, I mean, I think that was part of how I figured out the world and stuff, is just by making it really silly and then dialing it back.
When you're building a world, do you sort of set out the odds of, you know, like Sanderson has his laws, it's like, hey, they can't do this and they can do this, and because there are some sort of trade-offs and constraints within the world you've built. Is that something you discovered along the way, or is that something at the outset you went, I know this has to be a part of it?
You mean with the magic, or
yeah,
just in general?
With the magic, but also in general, like.
Yeah, with the magic, I was definitely pulling it out of my butt kind of as I went along, and then I kind of had to figure it out a little bit more when I was revising. I mean, the main thing with the magic is like, it kind of like the magic, you kind of see it two different ways, because you see it for the first like 100-something pages, like Patricia's a little kid, and she's just figuring it out on her own, and she doesn't know any other magic people, and so it's like, you know, it's just this mysterious thing that she's kind of struggling with, and it's sort of dreamlike and weird and kind of crazy and trippy, and then the other 2/3 of the book, she's integrated with magical society, and they do have all their own rules and their own, you know, history and their own kind of system of what magic is, or there's like 2 different systems that they've tried to merge into one system. And it's just, you know, I think that stuff is kind of a partial understanding of magic. And I feel like part of what I hope you kind of get by the end of the book is that nobody really understands it. Like there's like, you can come up with a system and rules and all this stuff, but that doesn't mean that you've actually understood all of it. You've just kind of figured out some stuff, kind of.
We have an audience mic if anyone wants to line up and take a question. I think one of the things for me, actually, it's funny that you picked the first passage to read from, because there was a moment about the emotional robots.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was so great, the way you describe emotions. It was like a virus state.
Right.
It was great. I was like, oh, that's something weirdly enough like I connect with, as maybe somebody who works in tech or something like that. Is that something that you kind of stumbled upon, or is it
the emotional
something,
robots?
Yeah. Like,
I
is it
guess
something
I've
you'd been
just-
mulling over for a while, or?
I just have known people who worked on emotional robots, and I've been around them a couple times. I don't know. I mean, I guess part of what it is that, you know, I wanted her to be somebody who works with technology, who's like as badass as Laurence is, as smart as him, as, you know, and I guess there's sort of a theme in the book. Like part of the thing with the caddy too is like about, you know, how we interact with other people and our connections to other humans and stuff. And so the idea of emotional robots was just another way of kind of getting at, you know, the thing of like technology and human interaction and how technology can simulate that, but also how technology can kind of either complicate or simplify human interaction.
Sometimes inhibit it, you know,
Yeah, or
when we're
inhibit it
staring at our
sometimes.
phones
Yeah,
all the
exactly.
time. And
Yeah, no, sometimes that's true.
well,
Yeah.
there'll come a day where robots know us better than we know ourselves.
I think, yeah, that's definitely going to happen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was
the book
a
is out,
pleasure.
and we'll have a signing after this. Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
Thanks. Woo.